Local, trusted. This is First News at 4 on KBTX News 3.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Kathleen Whitty coming to you from the sound booth at KBTX because, yes, they have let me turn First News at 4 into a podcast. This is an idea we've been tossing around for a little while. First News at 4, if you never have a chance to watch, as it airs at 4 p.m. every single day. A lot of you are at work. If you don't have a chance to watch, what it really is a news talk show. It's the show on KBTX where we get the rare opportunity in local news to dig a little bit deeper, either on local issues that matter to you with the local people who influence them, or on national or statewide or even international issues with experts we have right here in our backyard. A lot of smart people here in the Brazos Valley, and we get to talk to them about anything that we want to that is happening in the news. So anyway, because we know not a lot of folks get to watch First News at 4, we wanted to bring it to you in podcast form. The plan is to put this thing out once a week and give you some highlights from the week before of what we've done on the show. First up, we reached out to a political economist at Texas A&M. He's at the Bush School of Government and Public Service. He's a source we use a whole lot. Name is Raymond Robertson. We reached out to him because this trade war with China, between China and the White House, between the Trump administration, just continues to escalate and change. We get new news about it every single day. So we reached out to him to help us understand a little bit better what this China trade war means, what some possible new tariffs this week could mean. And he said, sure, let's talk about it. But if we're going to talk about China, we also have to talk about Mexico. This was right when we got the news that they might put that tariff on Mexico, the incremental tariff that could affect essentially all goods coming in from Mexico. So what Raymond Robertson did is he helped us understand the difference between the Chinese and the Mexican tariffs and how they would affect our economy a little bit differently. The trade war with China continues. So far, the U.S. has hit the country with a 25% tariff on $250 billion of Chinese goods. President Donald Trump has threatened to do the same thing on the remaining imports from China, which would be worth about $300 billion. At the same time, Beijing also raising tariffs on billions of dollars worth of our American goods. To talk more about this, we're joined by Dr. Raymond Robertson. He's a political economist at the Texas A&M Bush School of Government and Public Service, but he is summering right now with his family in Minnesota. So, Dr. Robertson, I originally reached out so we could talk about the China trade war, but now there's news with Mexico that we should talk about. What's going on?
Well, apparently there's no shortage of trade wars to talk about, Kathleen, so there's always something interesting. President Trump has announced that he might impose significant tariffs on all Mexican goods if Mexico doesn't deal with the immigration crisis of people coming in from Central America into the United States through Mexico.
Okay, so what would that apply to? I mean, how would it affect us, the consumer, if that tariff was placed on Mexican goods?
Well, what's interesting about these tariffs is that they're different from others that have been previously imposed, because he's saying that they'll impose tariffs on all Mexican goods. We import all kinds of things from Mexico that include both final goods, stuff that we eat, avocados and that sort of thing, but also a lot of parts that go into our production for cars and other types of products. So across the board, 5 to 25% tariff would be really devastating for Texan consumers and jobs.
Okay. So then what is going on with China? Because I've seen some updates that say, hey, the stock market isn't doing so bad, and it might be related to China news.
That's right. So there was a lot of concern over the last week about the trade war with China, which had been pushing the stock market down. And that meant that, of course, that people had great concerns about the economy. But just in the last couple of days, the Federal Reserve Chair Powell has announced that they might accommodate the trade war by lowering interest rates as a way to offset the adverse effects of the trade war.
Okay, in your expert opinion, would that work?
The thing about lowering interest rates is that interest rates are actually more of a brake on the economy than they are a foot on the gas. So if you reduce the interest rates, you'll keep the economy from slowing down, but it doesn't necessarily give it a jump.
So this trade war with China, is there any end in sight? I mean, how can this thing end in any kind of positive way?
The best outcome would be for the United States and China to reach an agreement that would resolve the dispute and allow us to remove these tariffs. We hope that that would be the case. On the other hand, China has also recently announced that they're considering holding back exports of rare earth metals, which would do great damage to the U.S. economy because we rely on those things for our cell phones and our other electronics.
Okay. Remind us, what's the goal? Why is this trade war with China happening at all?
The main reason is because we have a very significant trade deficit with China right now, and President Trump has been very upset about that. He's been saying that since China entered the WTO, our trade deficit has been growing, and China's been getting all of the benefits of trade with the United States, and the United States has been losing out. Now, of course, anyone who buys Chinese products wouldn't do that if they didn't get something from it. So it's really difficult to make that argument since trade is mutually beneficial, but that's been the argument the president is making.
Okay. Raymond Robertson, a political economist at the Texas A&M Bush School of Government and Public Service, though joining us today from Minnesota. Dr. Robertson, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Next up, we chatted with Ross Ramsey. If you don't know Ross, he's the co-founder of the Texas Tribune. That's a nonprofit, nonpartisan, all-online publication in Texas. So they're based out of Austin. They keep a real close eye on everything that's happening in the state capitol, which of course for the last 5 months with the legislative session going on has been a lot. But there's something else that's been happening. David Whitley is a friend of the governor's who was appointed as Secretary of State. Did not get confirmed, but then something else happened. We talked to Ross Ramsey about it because he's had his finger on the pulse of the Texas Capitol for years, and he has an interesting insight into the governor's choice to keep David Whitley alive in Texas politics, so to speak. Take a listen. Governor Greg Abbott recently added David Whitley to his state staff. That's even after Texas Senate Democrats refused to confirm Whitley as Secretary of State. The reason for this was apparently Whitley's handling of a botched voter citizenship review. But what does this say since the governor then hired him anyway? To talk a lot more about this, we're joined by Ross Ramsey. He's the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Ross, in your own words, can you take us back through who David Whitley is and why exactly he didn't get confirmed?
He's a longtime aide to the governor. He's well liked in the Senate, believe it or not. He's well liked in the governor's office. And he got promoted to this Secretary of State position. Governor Abbott appointed him Secretary of State right before the session started. And the way this works is that the Senate has to confirm you, and it takes 2/3 of the Senate to do that. And in this Senate, that means they had to have a couple of Democrats come along with all the Republicans. It's ordinarily not really a problem. In fact, Secretaries of State get confirmed all the time, even though they're often very partisan. It's a partisan position in some ways. But this time, the Secretary of State's office was in the middle of a voter roll cleanup effort. They got a list of people who were supposedly non-citizens who were also on the voter rolls. The list turned out to be massively flawed. It was really botched up. The Democrats accused the Republicans of dealing in bad faith on the voter rolls. It turned into a big election fight, and David Whitley is the guy who got caught in the middle. It ruined his confirmation to the Secretary of State job.
So he didn't get confirmed as Secretary of State. That feels like a pretty big hit. But then Governor Abbott came in and gave him another job. How did that happen? I think we're a little surprised that happened.
Well, usually when you get a scandal going on, like this one has been, the people in the middle of the scandal, sort of disappear. Everybody runs away from them. The Senate Democrats obviously didn't want to be associated with Whitley. The Republicans didn't get a chance to vote on him. But the governor stuck with him the whole time. And when it was all over, the governor was more loyal than politically scared, I guess, and hired David Whitley back onto his staff. He's a special advisor. He makes $205,000 a year, and he's still a state employee.
So what does that say? Does Governor Abbott just believe in second chances, think David Whitley is a good guy who made a silly mistake? I mean, what is this?
Well, I think that, they don't regard this necessarily as his mistake. They don't blame him. They think, the governor's office, I think, believes that the outcome of this was unfair and that he deserved a job. But in political terms, this amounts to an endorsement of what they were trying to do with the voter rolls. Ordinarily in politics, when somebody gets involved in something politically dicey, you see everybody disassociate from them. All of a sudden, they're all alone. They have no friends. David Whitley's case, that didn't happen. He had a friend in a high place who stuck with him, and basically said, whatever he did was not bad enough to put him on my naughty list.
Okay. Your analysis that you wrote here suggests that maybe Governor Abbott didn't think this was necessarily a very, very bad thing that happened. Right. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you are. Usually in politics, when you see somebody do something, everybody disassociates, and that's their way of saying we don't endorse this, we don't want to have anything to do with this. The flip almost is rare, but is also true. If somebody does something that is questionable and then you hold them close, you're holding close the things that everybody else thought was questionable. And I think that's the case with Abbott in this situation.
Yeah. It's interesting, Ross, I remember when KBTX, along with a lot of other news organizations, first put out this news about, wow, there are potentially so many non-citizens on our voter roll. Right. And then that was all proven false in a pretty big and spectacular way. Right. But still, what we know a lot of people only remember is that they saw this headline that said there are a bunch of non-citizens on the voter roll. I'm not sure everyone remembers that was disproved. And I guess there's not a question there. It still kind of blows my mind.
It was not only disproved, the state got sued by 3 different groups. The federal court in this case basically said, you need to go undo the damage that you did. You need to send letters back to the people that you warned off. And the state needs to pay the lawyers who sued the state $450,000. So it wasn't just allegations of a mistake, it was a straight up mistake.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Ross Ramsey, co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. We appreciate this coverage like this and so much more over at texastribune.org all the time. Do you ever think about how incredible it is that we can call a number, 911, and we know someone will be at the other end? And we know that person at the other end of the line is trained incredibly. We know they know how to stay cool under pressure. They know how to help us. They know how to get us to exactly the person that we need to help us in what might be one of the scariest moments of our lives, a medical emergency, a fire. There are so many reasons why we might call 911, and that person knows exactly how to help us. Indeed, they are the first responder to our situation. And that's one of the reasons why dispatchers, the person who is answering the phone, might be classified in Texas as first responders. Yeah, they're not already classified as first responders, but there's a law on the governor's desk here in Texas that if he signs it, would officially classify dispatchers as first responders. And dispatchers, unsurprisingly, are all for the law. So we reached out to the local Brazos County 911 to find out how they feel about it, to get a little insight into why this might matter to them. And what we actually uncovered from Brazos County 911 is that this is an entire national battle, and the stakes are even higher at the federal level. Joined by Laura Blackburn, who's the Associate Director of Brazos County 911, indeed a dispatcher herself. So this thing where dispatchers would possibly be classified as first responders, this is a bill on the governor's desk, by the way. He has yet to sign it, but we think he probably might. So how do you and your Brazos County 911 colleagues feel about this possibility?
Well, we're very excited about it, and we feel certain it's probably going to pass, but we're also very optimistic because we think this is a step in the right direction toward the larger movement that's at the federal level, where there's been, for several years now, there's been a push to reclassify public safety telecommunicators from the office and administrative support occupations over to protective service occupations.
Very interesting, and that's something that I'm learning from you today. Before the show, we chatted, and you told me about this fight that's been happening at the federal level. Back to the state level fight for just a second. If this bill does get signed into law, what would that mean in reality for you? Are there any benefits that come with this first responder classification?
So really the only benefits directly would be any services that are provided to first responders. They would then apply to the telecommunicators as well. As far as any other benefits, we're actually very fortunate here locally and even statewide mostly, where telecommunicators have always been seen as part of the first responder family already, and we receive a lot of the same or similar benefits as other first responders.
Yeah, I got to admit, and I think some folks at home might feel the same way. I didn't know that you guys weren't already considered first responders. So you maybe get that a lot. So then on this national level, that sounds like a fight that would really mean something. What would that do if indeed that reclassification happened on the federal level?
So we think that it would make everyone more aware of the important role that we do play in protecting the public. And also in some states where standards aren't quite as high as they are here in Texas for hiring and training and such, we hope that it would then raise those standards to that same level. So
in reading reports about this fight to make dispatchers officially first responders, so many people have been talking about the training, the extensive training that goes into becoming a dispatch worker, that it is extensive in the same way that other first responders training is. Can you give us a little insight?
Right. So there's so much training involved in caller questioning, making sure that we ask the right questions, gather the right information, and then relay it to the field responders themselves. And that goes along with protecting the public, protecting the 911 callers, protecting bystanders, and the field responders that are going out. We have to operate all kinds of technical equipment, use various technologies to track 911 callers, to track the field responders, using radio equipment, that sort of thing. So there's always training.
From what I understand, when a dispatcher is doing their job correctly, as we just figure you always are, you are saving lives. You are helping to save these lives just like the rest of the first responders.
Right, and there's always the stress that goes along with that as well. So since they're
right. The stress, the trauma
dealing
even,
with,
in certain cases that other first responders do have to deal with. Okay, well, we'll see if the governor signs this one. We feel like he probably will, and we'll certainly be watching that federal fight. Our plan here on the First News at 4 podcast is to end the podcast on the lightest note we can find, which is how we end our weeks on First News at 4, with Free Music Friday. Every single Friday, we have a band, usually a local band, come in and they play for us live in our studio. So we figured, why not end the podcast that way? This week, we had a real fun band that's right from the Bryan College Station area. They're called The Briars. And they're sort of like a country rock. I don't know. I always ask these bands to describe their music, and I think it's the question they hate the absolute most. So I don't really know how to describe them. I just know that it is exactly the kind of music that I would want if I were sitting on the porch on a Friday afternoon with a cold drink. But maybe that's just me. We'll let you take a listen and decide for yourselves. Again, this is The Briars.
I'm headed up to Boulder. Gotta take a load. I'm headed up to Boulder. I got this freight train in tow. We got 2 days left. I'm headed back home. And I'm a long way from Texas. Still got a long way to go. And I'm headed up to Boulder with my girl mine. Gotta get this freight train a little further on down that line. She says that she's lonely. She's tired of waiting around. And I gotta head back to the station before my baby skips town. Pulled into the station, and she wouldn't leave. I drove on back home. I found a note sitting by the stairs. She says that she ran off with old Jim Brown. But that's alright, baby. Got plenty more of you in those other towns. And I'm headed back to Boulder, my girl and mine. I gotta get this freight train on a little further on down that line. She says that she's lonely, she's tired of waiting around. And I gotta head back to the station before my baby skips town.
That was The Briars, a local band who was on First News at 4 for our Free Music Friday segment. Hey, we appreciate so much you tuning in for our First News at 4 podcast. Again, this is something we're trying out. We would love for you to take a listen every week. We're going to try to get these out on Friday afternoon or Saturday for you so you can subscribe and get a little taste of how KBTX is digging deeper into the news that matters to you. Not a lot of local news channels give this kind of time to these sort of topics, so I feel lucky that I get to host and anchor the show, and I hope that you'll listen and that you'll enjoy the journalism we're doing here. Thanks so much.